Today's episode is brought to you by Patreon. If you're interested in supporting the show, go to patreon.com/JoshuaVelas and become a $2 backer today and get early access to the new episodes. I'll be leaving a link in the description down below, but for now, on to today's episode. You're listening to the Augmented Experience podcast. I'm your host, as usual, Joshua Velas. I'm a student, musician, and a gamer at heart. Join me as I sit down every week to talk about all the latest news in the technology, business, and video game world. I hope you guys enjoy. All right, everybody, welcome back to the show. My name is Joshua Velas. I am your host as usual, and obviously, welcome back to the show. Today's episode 135 of the show. And before we get started, we're going to do a bit of house cleaning quick because, well, we always like to do house cleaning around here, and, well, to me, it's just always nice doing it because we always have something to talk about. So, yeah, let's get right into it. I do want to say thank you guys for coming back and listening. It really does mean a lot to me. You guys constantly keep coming back, and you keep listening to these episodes, you keep downloading them, you keep sharing them. And for me, it's definitely nice knowing that you guys really do like these episodes. You do listen to them, you do watch them. And for me, that really means a lot to me, and I thank you guys for that, and I greatly appreciate it. And you know, I say that a lot because, in my opinion, I know I say that a lot, where I always thank you guys for everything, but I really do mean it, and I hope you guys know that I do mean it, and at least can understand coming from me that I do greatly appreciate everything you guys do, because you guys are the ones that listen to the episodes, you share them, you download them. You know, if you're a Patreon backer, you obviously support me as well. And for me, I do greatly appreciate that. So thank you guys for that. I also want to give a shout out to the Patreon backers. Thank you guys for supporting me, supporting the show. And it's greatly appreciated, to be honest. I do also want to say thank you guys for helping us. We're almost close to 1,950 total downloads. So let's keep pushing. Hopefully we can get to 2,000 before the end of the year, because that was my goal for this year, that I wanted to go to 1,000 total, at least 2,000 total downloads by the end of the year. So let's hope we can hit that. So let's keep going. I do also want to say that, yes, this episode will be coming a little bit later than usual because of technical issues that I don't really want to go into so much, but we can just acknowledge it. Yes, there were some issues. So, you know, we just have to go with it. But yes, this episode will be a little bit later, but it will still be on Wednesday because it's still a Wednesday episode. Now, time to go in today's episode, which this topic it's very broad in the sense that it's not just one specific topic, because it really encompasses a lot of things going on with the Xbox Series X and Series S as well, because, you know, same console, well, same next generation console, just, you know, different specs. But I do want to talk a lot about the news that has been going around. Some has already been debunked, some are new things, and at the same time also discussing some I would say information that has gone around regarding an interview done with Kotaku and Phil Spencer, the head of Xbox. And I do want to talk about that information as well, because to me, it solidifies the point that a lot of people have been making, because it's not a point regarding, you know, console wars. It's not a point of saying fanboyism or anything like that, but it is something that we expected that was going to happen, and that people shouldn't have been surprised when he said it. So this episode is primarily going to be called, I would say, we're going to call it tech news, and it's going to be focused on Xbox Series X news. And for me, I do want to address the whole issue that was going around regarding overheating with the Xbox Series X, that a lot of people were stating how, oh, this thing's running super hot, that this thing is not cool, that, you know, this thing's going to heat up your entire room and basically be a space heater. And to me, I was like, okay, something doesn't sound right here, because there was a lot of people talking about how, I would say on Twitter, there's people saying, well, don't be surprised with all the people saying that the Xbox is shutting down and overheating and, you know, destroying people's stuff. And then when people ask them, okay, do you have proof? And they were like, and then just stay silent. And to me, it was so fascinating that this became such a big issue, because yes, I would be honest, yeah, it would be a bit of an issue of concern if there was consoles overheating and causing damages and things like that. So all the people that did get preview units, they decided to come out, and when they started doing tests of the Xbox, they decided to have their thermal cameras on those things to see how hot these things run. I mean, you notice the range, it actually runs very cool. It runs around 55 degrees Celsius to 60 degrees Celsius under load. And, you know, when it's just an idle, it's probably like around 40, 45 in that range. And if you think about it, in comparison to a lot of PC parts, many people have noted, especially say a 2080 Ti or even the new graphics cards, the 3080s, 3090s, and soon to be the 3070. Yes, those graphics cards under load are about 75, 80 degrees Celsius in that range, or at least if you want to be like minimum 70, highball around 80. Then the fact that the Xbox is doing all of that in a very confined space, it's running around, 40 to 60 degrees Celsius, obviously not, under load. If it was running 40 degrees Celsius under load, that'd be pretty insane. But the fact that it's running in a healthy space is, in my opinion, good. And I'm glad, because it just proves that, yes, the heatsink is doing its job. Like, the cooling method that Xbox decided to go with for the Series X and Series S is functioning properly because it's able to cool the console properly. So that's essentially doing its job properly. And yes, obviously when you like touch, I would say put your hand where the vents are, of course it's gonna feel hot, because duh, hot air is supposed to be blowing out. Like, why do you think with most PC builds people recommend that you have good airflow, that you have a good amount of outtakes, you have a good amount of intake fans? Like in my NZXT H500i, I have two 240 millimeter fans blowing on my CPU and GPU. So those, I would consider them as, well, I set them as inputs is what I did. So they're just blowing air onto my parts, and obviously my liquid cooler is on my CPU, so that is set as an intake fan. And then the outtake is on the very top, so that's able to disperse a lot of that heat. But in my opinion, it's definitely interesting seeing how a lot of people are trying to make news out of nothing and essentially just promoting false information, because if anything, yes, it has been shown that the PlayStation will run hotter. It's still running under 70 degrees Celsius, so it's not an issue. But that just shows that, yes, people will take any information, try to construe it to push a narrative, and you have to be very careful when it comes to these kind of things, because the same thing happened with the next piece of news that we're talking about, where we're talking about the whole UI situation regarding the PS5 and the Xbox Series X and Series S, that the new UIs have been leaked, and that the PlayStation 5's UI is going to be running at 4K, while the Xbox's is going to be running at 1080p. And someone mentioned something very interesting to me, how Microsoft did the same thing with the Xbox One X, where they had the UI run at 1080p because they wanted to focus on the developers getting more power, or having, I would say, having more resources for developing games, rather than putting those resources into the UI, because in my opinion, that makes more logical sense. You'd rather have more power dedicated to games and making sure the games run as best as they possibly can, rather than pushing so much on a 4K UI that you'll, yes, I get it, you'll see it, but at the same time, a lot of people mentioned how, unless if you are genuinely seeing it, like I would say, like if someone straight up told you this is 1080p, this is 4K, that would be the only instance where I see somebody would actually care. In my opinion, that's the only time I could genuinely see where someone would say they care. And to me, it's just fascinating, because they're trying to make a big deal out of nothing. And it's just, like I said, this is part of the console wars. This is part of, fanboyism, that tribalism, that if something doesn't support, or I would say everyone's going to find a way to justify their piece of plastic or their box of plastic, because essentially that both of these consoles are just giant boxes of plastic. And to me, it's just fascinating how, just seeing how Sony fanboys are trying to get whatever they can to dish the Xbox. Same thing goes for the Xbox fanboys, trying to do anything they can to bash the Sony fanboys. It just goes back and forth in the whole situation, because that's tribalism for you. That's what happens. But in my opinion, this whole UI talk is very stupid. In my opinion, it's a non-issue in my opinion, because they even said, like, look, this is pre-software. This is not final. They could pump out a patch where it runs at 4K if you really wanted to. I just don't see the point, because it's like, You get what I'm saying? Like, there's no point in having a 4K UI. Like, no one really cares, in my opinion. Like, it's not that big of a deal because developers have even talked about how Microsoft specifically mentioned how they got a lot of pushback from developers about having a 4K UI because they rather have the more resources for games. So Microsoft was like, okay, we backed off, we just did 1080p and we moved on. So we just have to wait and see what Microsoft decides because, like I said, this is pre-production software, pre-production hardware, because everyone that currently has an Xbox Series X right now is not a final model. It's obviously pre-production because the final models will be ready in November. But in my opinion, I just feel like this is a non-issue. I just feel like people are just trying to basically focus on crap right now. But that's all I can really say in regards to that. However, the next piece of news is interesting because we have talked about this before, where Microsoft had acquired ZeniMax, which includes Bethesda and all the studios that go with it. And to me, this recent interview Phil Spencer did with Kotaku is very important because this was this very specific question that was asked. And, I'm going to read it to you because obviously we can't do video right now because of the whole technical issues. But I do want to read this quote for you because it is very important in the sense of where Microsoft's mindset is going into this next generation. So Kotaku asked this question: is it possible to recoup a $7.5 billion investment if you don't sell Elder Scrolls 6 on the PlayStation? And Phil Spencer said, yes. And a lot of people are like, well, does this confirm that, Elder Scrolls and Doom and I keep forgetting what that next game is, Starlink, I believe, that those games are going to be all on Xbox only and PC? And in my opinion, this should have been common sense from the get-go. The reason I say this is because I've always stated this multiple times to multiple people, that to me, it doesn't make logical sense to acquire a studio for that much money if you aren't planning to make the money back. I get it. Microsoft has a ton of money to throw around. They could buy and sell Sony if they wanted to. Or if they were allowed to, is probably the better term to use because hooray, monopoly laws, which obviously is a good thing because that would be a terrible idea if that ever happened. But we also need to be mindful of things like it's a smart business strategy. Like, you buy something to make money off it. That's business 101. That's common sense. And it only makes sense because Microsoft knows that they own the majority of the market. Think about it. You have Game Pass. You have xCloud. xCloud now is going to work on Android and iOS because they're currently in the process of getting it to work through a website or, basically through a browser, the same way Amazon is doing with theirs, so that they could use xCloud on iPhones instead of going through the App Store. The same thing, obviously with Android, it's a little bit different because Android, they could just work, right? You could just download the app and go. But the fact that Microsoft also is the operating system for PCs, which majority of people own a PC, and the fact that they can put all their games on mobile, PC, and their Xbox consoles, Microsoft owns the majority of the market. They do. They own about like 80% if you don't include the PlayStation and you don't include the Switch, because obviously, that's where you split because, Nintendo and PlayStation have their share, obviously. But Microsoft owns the majority because they obviously own the Xbox brand, they own the PC space, and they own the mobile space. Those are very big markets. And I get it. Especially if you look at how the mobile space is going right now, a lot of our smartphones, or I'd say the modern day smartphone, I would say starting from 2018 up, I would even argue maybe 2017 up, have been capable of playing games with no issues. And the fact that these smartphones keep getting better and better every year, it becomes a more viable option to play games on. Yes. Am I going to say mobile gaming is the greatest thing ever? No. But I will admit that yes, these smartphones are starting to become powerful enough that they can replace a good amount of laptops and doing a lot of things. Same thing with iPads, same thing with Android tablets, that they're able to do a lot of the functions that you could get from, say, a Nintendo Switch and things like that, because some of these smartphones can actually run games theoretically better than a Nintendo Switch. And that's pretty impressive in my opinion. And the fact that we're going this direction where Microsoft knows that they have great IPs now, that they have games coming, that there's a lot of games coming, because think about it. The fact that now you own Elder Scrolls, you own Doom, you own Wolfenstein, you own all these great IPs, and then on top of, like, say, Gears of War, Halo, Forza, Minecraft, that you own all these big IPs. Even though you may not like all of them, they're still good, and obviously they still have the nice healthy new IPs coming, like Avowed from Obsidian, or Grounded, obviously from Obsidian as well. That you have all these different IPs, you have all these new games, and to be honest, it's very interesting seeing how this is all playing out so far, because Microsoft knows that they own the market. They own the majority of the market. So now they're pushing the pro consumer model to entice people to play their games wherever they want. And I get it. A lot of people say, well, doesn't this counteract Microsoft's claims of exclusives being bad and that this isn't fair, that this isn't cool? But Microsoft never really said that exclusives were bad, because you also have to think about it like this, is that a lot of people have stated this before, and I think it's very true, that nobody gave Sony the same amount of crap when they bought Insomniac. And now that Microsoft has bought Bethesda, or ZeniMax is probably the better term to use, they bought ZeniMax, that they're getting all this crap for it. But you also have to keep in mind that exclusives are needed in some aspects for your platform, because you obviously need something to entice people to come play on your platform. The thing is with the Xbox platform is so broad because it includes multiple devices. It's not just the Xbox. The Xbox is one way to play. There's also your smartphone, there's your computers, your tablets. There's multiple ways to play games on the Xbox ecosystem, because that's what Microsoft is focusing on. They're focusing on the ecosystem approach rather than just doing proprietary hardware and things like that, because Microsoft realizes going forward, services seem to be more, I'd say, the future approach rather than hardware, because Apple is even doing the same thing too. Apple realizes that yes, hardware is not the future, it's software, because the hardware's gotten so good that people just hold on to it for such a long period of time that it doesn't really matter. And Microsoft is realizing that, and this is working out for them because they're making all these very prosumer moves. They're making all these healthy moves that are showing the consumer that yes, you can trust the brand, that you're building up your brand, your reputation. You're building up trust with your customers, because if you can get them enticed, then they keep coming back and buying your products. And that's just how this works. That's business 101. That's common sense. Like, a lot of people seem to constantly forget that's how the market works. And it's a very interesting, I would say, strategy, because think about it. Now that Microsoft owns ZeniMax, you have the option. Are you going to buy a PlayStation to play God of War? Or are you going to buy an Xbox or a PC or use your smartphone to play Elder Scrolls? Because you won't be able to play that on a PlayStation. And I know a lot of people are like, Josh, I don't think that they'll be crazy enough to put Elder Scrolls 6, Doom, maybe Starlink, Wolfenstein and things like that, that they won't make it only on the Xbox and PC. I think they would. They have nothing to lose because they have more units. They have a bigger player base, because you're including PC, you're including the mobile space, and you're also including the Xbox install base, which, think about it. If you want to play the games, I would say games, even multiplats, the best. Yes, I would always say PC is the best place to play, because just being honest, yes, you get much better results and frame rates and resolutions with a PC, even though, yes, you will be spending a good amount of money. However, in comparison to the Xbox Series X, yes, the Xbox Series X provides a hell of a value at $500. The fact that you're getting an incredibly fast SSD, you're getting high refresh rate gaming at 120 hertz, 4K, and 1080p, the fact that you're getting, very solid hardware for $500 that's comparable to about a $1,500 PC, that's very impressive, to be honest. And even though, yes, if you do the math and you check the longevity, including Xbox Live Gold and things like that, which at the rate we're going, I wouldn't be surprised if Xbox Live Gold becomes free, which at that point, then it becomes an even better value in terms of the Xbox, because yes, with the PC, you have to buy all the parts, you have to build it, which I still say building a computer is easy. I've done it multiple times. I recently just built one quickly as hell, even though, which is funny because I actually had to go a little bit slower this time because I had to show my friend how, to properly teach him how to build it, and it worked perfectly fine. But my record time for building PCs is an hour, about under an hour. And to me, it's just fascinating seeing how all this is playing out. And to me personally, it's interesting because yes, I do believe Microsoft has a healthy approach going towards this next generation in comparison to Sony, because they're pushing so much for cloud gaming. They're pushing Game Pass. They're pushing buying studios out and getting better first-party games on the Xbox ecosystem. And notice I say ecosystem rather than the Xbox console, because they're essentially putting all these good games on the Xbox ecosystem, making it enticing, like giving you a reason to play in their ecosystem and get involved in the ecosystem. And yes, that doesn't mean the Sony exclusives aren't great. I do admit God of War 2 is hype. Spider-Man Miles Morales is hype. If we're looking at the next generation lineup so far, the launch titles, Sony has the better launch titles. That's just fact. They do. Now, that doesn't mean that Microsoft doesn't have anything good to keep people enticed, because you have Cyberpunk getting its better patch on Xbox. You have Assassin's Creed Valhalla launching with the Xbox Series X. You have Rainbow Six Siege getting the much appreciated upgrade to higher frame rates and things like that on the Xbox Series X day one patch. You're also getting all the backwards compatibility and all the bonuses that come with the new hardware, all the performance boosts for all those backwards compatible games, because now all those games are going to be running so much better, which to me, I want to play Monster Hunter World at 60 frames per second, to be honest, because I hated playing it at like choppy 30. I'd rather be playing it at a smooth 60 with no issues, or maybe 120 if it allows it. But I also say, like, playing Warframe at nice steady 60 FPS without dealing with those long ass load times. And to me, it's going to be fun because I get to play a lot of those games that I haven't played in a while, because to me, it was better just to play on my PC. Even though, yes, I've told people many times, I didn't buy Monster Hunter World on PC. I didn't really play Warframe so much on my PC because I like all the stuff that I had on my Xbox account that I couldn't transfer over, which sucked. And now my Xbox is going to be able to play those games perfectly fine, so now I can enjoy them even more. And to me, that's a benefit. And then you also have the Halo Master Chief Collection getting 4K 120 hertz for multiplayer and campaign day one patch with the Series X. And I think that's very impressive that game, especially with how popular the Master Chief Collection is becoming, that especially on PC with the soon to be launch of Halo 4 and all the new, like all the bug fixes and things like that they'll be adding. But to me, it's going to be very interesting, and I hope you guys are excited. I'm personally, like I've mentioned before, and I mentioned this multiple times, yes, I will be getting an Xbox Series X day one on launch day, no questions asked. I will be doing a review. I will be doing an unboxing of that, giving my first impressions and thoughts about it and doing just a review. And I'm excited because this is the first time that I'm buying a console day one. So we're gonna have to deal with the labor pains. That's just the cold hard facts of buying a new product day one, is that yes, there's going to be bugs, there's going to be issues. That's the point of being an early adopter, is that you get to try it out, you get to be on the bleeding edge. However, you have to deal with all the labor pains that come with it. And for me, I'm still excited because, like I said, I always prefer playing on Xbox over PlayStation, even though my first console was a PlayStation 2, and then I got a Wii, and then I got a DS, then I got a 3DS, and then I got my Xbox 360, then I got my Xbox One, then I got my Xbox One S. And now we're going with the Series X. So, in my opinion, you should be excited. Everyone should be excited because this is a very interesting time, because now we're going to have healthy competition in the first party space for both Xbox and PlayStation. And overall, we win in the end because now everyone gets to play great games. That's just the cold hard reality, is that everybody is going to get to play great games. And you should be excited, especially because this next generation is the biggest performance jump we've had in a very, very long time, where now we're comparable to PCs now. So I hope you guys enjoyed today's episode. I know it's coming a little bit later, but I thank you guys for at least being patient with me and being understanding. I love you guys to death. Please continue to be safe. I won't be doing a Friday episode this week because of school. Like I've already mentioned this before, school will always come first no matter what. But I hope you guys enjoy this episode. Thank you guys for your love and patience with me. Please continue to be safe. Please continue to take care of everyone around you, because in my opinion, that's the most important thing you can do, is continue to take care of everyone around you, because times are still weird. They're going to continue to be weird as we try to adjust to a new normal of living, and that's really all we can do at this point. But I thank you guys for everything. Please continue to be safe, and I hope you guys have a wonderful week. Please don't do anything dumb, and I'll see you guys next week. Bye, guys.
Hey there, thank you for listening to today's episode. I really appreciate it. Thank you guys so much for taking time out of your day and listening to today's episode. If you're interested in supporting the show, whether it be financially, clicking the follow button, or just sharing the episode, it all works for me, guys. Thank you guys so much for your time, and I love you guys to death.